Welcome back to Old School Sports and our franchise hockey manager playthrough of the Chicago Blackhawks. And they are the Stanley Cup champion Chicago Blackhawks. Won the Stanley Cup about a month ago. Pretty shocking result for the second year of a rebuild, but obviously happy to have that title on the books. Now the project is to see if we can avoid being a one-year wonder. We were the seventh best record in the Western Conference in terms of points, and we had some definite injury issues, not just during the season, but honestly during the playoffs, and still caught fire at the right time. Got a couple breaks with some upsets of some top teams that we weren't involved in that made our path to the finals a little bit easier. And then after falling behind 3-1 to the Ottawa Senators in the Stanley Cup finals, won 3 games in a row to clinch the Stanley Cup. So great season from the Blackhawks, but we've got a lot of work to do now to kind of build this into something that's honestly sustainable and more than just one season, as I said. Taking a look at our cap obligations for this upcoming season, we're at about $78 million right now. So what that tells me is it's probably time to move on from Seth Jones, who we owe an average of $9.5 million for the next 6 seasons at this point. He is going to be turning 30 years old right before the season starts. And he is a very good defenseman, but I don't think he's a great defenseman, and we're paying him like he is a perennial Norris Trophy candidate, which he's not. So I think we're going to look to move on from him, and then the question when we do move on from him is, what do we want to do with that money? Because that'll open up about $12-13 million total for us to spend with the cap room we have now, plus getting his salary off the books. And there's 2 directions we could go. Carolina, for some reason, has let Sebastian Aho hit the free agent market. He would obviously be a huge addition to the front line of our team. That's one route to follow. Second route to follow would be to use that money to really build the depth of our team and bring on 3 or 4 players who can really kind of flesh out the back end of our lineup for us. Because right now we do only have 3 left wings, 3 centers, and 4 right wings on the NHL roster. And one of those right wings is Gavin Hayes, who we just finally signed to an entry-level contract. He may be ready to play in the NHL. He may need a little more seasoning. So we definitely need to help our front line. So the question is whether we help it by bringing on 1 rock star and a few replacement-level guys that we just try to barely afford, or do we bring on 3 or 4 guys who can all be above average NHL players, but not anyone who's a particular superstar. So that is the big decision that we have to make in the very near term, because obviously if we don't jump in immediately on a player like Aho, the decision will be made for us when he goes in a different direction. We did also make 3 offers to players who we have the rights for on entry-level contracts. Hopefully get some goaltenders who may help us down the line, which would be helpful. We also made a couple of very minor trades. We traded away Stefan Franti, who was a player in the ECHL, for a 7th rounder. And then we also traded away, if I could find it, backup goalie who spent the whole year in AHL, Phoenix Copley, for a 7th rounder. Honestly, was kind of surprised we got anything for Copley. And now the big decision is what we want to do with the offers that we've gotten on Seth Jones. And honestly, at the end of our last episode, I was saying that I was hoping I could find something better than these offers when building a trade myself. And honestly, I haven't been able to find anything better than what St. Louis offered us, which is a third-round pick for him. He has a limited number of teams that he is willing to go to because of his no trade or no movement clause. So that makes things a little trickier for us. And I don't love the fact that we would potentially be moving him to a division rival, but given that we think his contract is potentially a problem, there is an argument to be made that moving it to a division rival is exactly what we should be doing. You know, for the quality of player that he is, I feel like getting more than a third rounder would be nice, but it's really about getting the contract off of the books and opening up the money to really rebuild this team in this upcoming free agency. And I don't want to wait too long to do it. And when I look at our defense right now, on the right defense side, where Jones has been our number one pairing along with Caleb Jones when he's been healthy, we've got Rasmus Anderson and Philip Hronek. You know, those guys could certainly move up to the first and second lines on the right side. And then Connor Murphy is a stay-at-home defenseman, would be a fine third-line guy. On the left side, we're a little bit weaker. We've got Caleb Jones. Jake McCabe, we've had on the trade block basically since we started this playthrough, but he is a respectable stay-at-home defenseman in the final year of his contract. But then after him, it's kind of mixing and matching. Last year, we mixed between Philip Rose and Alec Regula, more often Regula. And we do also have Kevin Korchinski, who is with us now after spending last year in the OHL. I don't know that he's quite ready. He may need a little bit of seasoning down in the AHL before we're ready to put him on the big squad. But I feel like we can definitely piece together 3 left defenders and 3 right defenders and someone to kind of be a backup for those guys on the 23-man roster, even if we move on from Jones. And as I talked about, that opens up a lot of money for us to improve our front line. So we're going to go ahead and trade him to the division rival, who tied for the best record in the Western Conference last year with 106 points. Maybe a move that we regret over the next year or two, but I think it's a good move for us for the long term. And I can't get a third rounder from anyone else. I've looked that he's willing to be traded to. So I think this is the best return we can get. So we're going to go ahead and move on from Seth Jones, and clearly that makes our cap situation look a lot different at about $68.5 million in expenses for next year, which then puts the next big decision front and center for us. Do we go with one potentially transcendent player, or do we go to build up a bunch of guys to kind of strengthen our second and third lines? In some cases, we might even be able to get a first line forward and move everyone else down a bit and improve the team that way. And I had really been leaning towards picking up 3 or 4 guys with that money and really building the depth of our team, particularly if we get into a situation like last season where we had a lot of injuries, particularly at a bad time. But how often does a player like him hit the open market? And how often do you have the money to pick up a player like Aho when he's on the open market? He brings everything. Strong mentally, exceptionally gifted physically and offensively, and he's more than capable defensively. Yeah, you look at the way he's produced over the course of his career. Came right in as a 19-year-old, and he's never scored fewer than 24 goals in a season. Never had fewer than 49 points in a season. And he's probably had the two best years of his career the last two seasons. He's looking for a lot of money, as he should be. $11.3 million, 6 years. Going to offer him a little less than that. I don't know if it's going to go anywhere. If we can get him at our price, though, I mean, essentially, we could be trading Caleb Jones for Sebastian Aho and a third-round pick, which seems like a no-brainer to me. But maybe I don't have a brain. So he's looking for $11.3 million, 6 years, no movement clause. We're going to offer him a little less, $10.75 million for 6 years with the no movement clause. See what he thinks of that. Wants a little more. Bump it up to $10.95 million, 6 years, no movement clause. He is willing to think about it. So that obviously would be the huge move of our off season if we can get that to go through. It is going to put us into a situation where we may need to look to take off a player who's making $4 or $5 million a year and kind of reload with 2 or 3 or 4 other guys who are making $1 million, $1.5 million. One candidate for that would be Ross Colton, who we picked up as a free agent last year. Had some injury issues, was respectable for us, but isn't a total difference maker. And then the other option would be one of the stay-at-home defensemen in their 30s, so either a Connor Murphy or a Jake McCabe. We like kind of having those type of guys, especially on our third line, who are just really good stay-at-home defensemen, but they're also both making, $4 million, over $4 million a year, getting to the point where their skills are probably deteriorating a bit, and they don't bring much to the table other than being excellent defensive defensemen, which certainly counts for something. But if we do get Aho signed, those are the kind of moves that we may have to make, because at the money he's looking for, that's going to give us a couple $1 million to potentially spend to flesh out the rest of the roster. But it does give us a incredible talent. He's a center by trade, so I like the fact that he also could play wing, but realistically he probably becomes our number 1 center, Larkin number 2, and Horvat number 3, which is, I don't know how you can do much better than that for your top 3 centers. And then we're still weak on the wings. We've got Kane and Arvidsson on the right side. Maybe Hayes is ready to be a good offensive player for us. And then at left wing, we really don't have a lot. So that would be the key area of focus to try to spend what little money that we would have left. And given that left wing is such a need, Yakov Trenin is a guy who we looked at the end of last episode. Don't necessarily love the scouting report. Not the smartest guy in the world. Not going to be well liked. But he is a respectable player. A left winger, not looking for tons of money. Pretty solid defensively. Pretty strong mentally. His physical ratings for an NHL player are nothing exceptional, and offensively he's not all that great, but he's also looking for less than $2 million a year. So he's definitely in the mix. I don't think we're going to go for him right this second, because there are definitely other left wingers and right wingers out there. Granted, most of them are looking for more money than he is. One very interesting defensive prospect will probably put an offer in, but I'm sure it will be matched. Jake Sanderson from Ottawa is a restricted free agent. Certainly, looking at his scouting report, I think he can be better than Seth Jones, stays out of trouble on the ice. Former number 5 overall pick, and certainly has the profile of a guy who would be a defenseman that we could build around for years to come. He's not looking for an insane amount of money either. $3.8 million for 5 years. We're going to offer him a little more than that just to basically just mess with the Senators, since we just beat him in the Stanley Cup Finals. If we can get him for 3.95, actually, I'm going to make it even more. I'm sure they're going to match it. But if we can get Sanderson at 21, soon to be 22 years old, for a little over $4 million a year, we would happily move on from one of those aging defensemen that I just mentioned, who are making in the same neighborhood, even though they're better defensively. So we'll pump it up to $4.15 million. Again, I'm confident that the Senators are going to match this, but guessing it would probably be a second rounder. Yeah, have to give them a second rounder, which would be fine. We'll put that offer out there. Again, I don't think there's any way that Ottawa won't match it. But if we do pick him up, that just gives us an excuse to trade away Connor Murphy or Jake McCabe, and then we're no worse for the wear in terms of our financial situation. And we're going to make one other offer in these early stages of free agency, and that's bringing back Jason Dickinson. Solid defensive player for us. He's mostly been a center for us, but as you can see, he can also play left wing. Very well could be if we do bring Aho on board. As I talked about, we've got 3 guys who could be first-line centers on a lot of teams as centers at that point. So Dickinson probably could get a little bit more of a run on the ice in a different position, but he is a solid defensive player, does the dirty work for us, and not looking for an exceptional amount of money. $1.625 million over 3 years. We're gonna start the conversation a little less. If I could do this properly, at $1.5 million for 3 years. See what he thinks of that. Wants a little more. Can't blame him. $1.55 million, although he's not really thrilled with the offer. We'll see what happens there with Dickinson. So we've got offers out to 3 guys now. Well, actually more than that, because I mentioned that we had put the offers out to a few of our former draft choices too. But Dickinson, Aho, obviously, as the star of the show, and then Jake Sanderson, a deal that I'm sure will be matched by Ottawa, and then Comesso, Kaiser, and Bass as guys who we've drafted in the past or have the rights for that will be signing their first contracts. Oh, probably an unsurprising news, the offer to Sebastian Aho, not going to be enough, so he's looking for more. Jason Dickinson. I don't really understand that feedback. He says, "Are you kidding about the offer?" But he says the Blackhawks have offered him a better deal. I don't know if that's just some kind of bug, but Aho doesn't like the offer. Sanderson looks like there's potential. Comesso, Kaiser, and Bass will obviously just be signing because those are entry-level contracts. A bunch of trades done also. So the question is, do we go back to Mr. Aho? Dickinson does claim that he's got a better offer from Pittsburgh now, so that makes more sense. Aho, not surprisingly, with a better offer from Anaheim. Sanderson is going to get matched by Ottawa, so I think we've got to go back to Aho with something bigger. Says he wants 12.5 million, and we haven't taken an offer off the table. It seems like a bug in the way things are working, so I don't know whether this is going to work out or not. 11.25, probably not. 11.45, and that may be about as high as I want to go. I lied. I'll try 11.65, and that's it. Actually, I'll go 11.75, but we're going to walk away if he won't think about this. All right, so Aho is looking for crazy money, as he should be. The negotiations aren't at a good stage. I think it may be time to quickly on July 2nd, while there's a lot of other players out there, pivot to plan B. Clearly, there's a lot of interest in Aho, as there should be. Even if we offer him close to 12 million that he's looking for right now, it's not inconceivable that he's going to come back and end up getting paid closer to 13 million. So it may be time to pivot a bit. So we're going to revisit things with Mr. Dickinson and see if we can get him back for 1.75 million. And he's willing to think about that. And then I think the next guy we go for is Luke Kunin. Decent defensive player, got some good physical skills, pretty sound mentally, except he can lose his temper a bit, and not a bad offensive player. More of a, second or third line kind of guy, which is fine. But I think particularly with the fact that we need another wing, he can play an important role for our team. He's only 26 years old. He's looking for decent money, but after trading away Seth Jones, we do have some money to spend. He's looking for almost 4.7 million for 3 years. We'll offer him 4.25, which he's not going to go for. Will he go for 4.45? All right, 4.55 million for Kunin. And then the other question is, do we want to go for Yakov Trenin? And I think I will. The amount of money he's looking for is not crazy. Again, he's just a solid second or third line kind of wing, but that is what we need on this team. He's not looking for a crazy amount of money, so if we get him signed and he's just hated by the rest of the team, or he's so dumb that he's messing things up for us, shouldn't be too hard to get out of that contract. There'll be teams that'll be able to take on that money, and we can get a 5th or 6th round pick in return probably. So we'll start off offering him 1.75 million a year over 3 years. Obviously he wants more than that. 1.9 million, and we're going to submit that offer to him. So now at this point, we've got offers to a couple of wingers as well as a center out there, so some decent players. I did check in offline on Jonathan Taves, by the way, and he's still looking for $7.5 million a year after not playing last season. Would have been happy to have him back, but not at that kind of number. The hope kind of is that we somehow get Sanderson at this point, but I cannot imagine that Ottawa is going to let him walk. Another guy that I guess we could look at is Braden Tracy. Looking at his age and his ratings, I'm assuming he is also a restricted free agent. Really good physical skills, pretty decent offensively, good temperament and mental ratings. Doesn't bring a lot to the table defensively, but I think he's still a player that could help us. Yeah, the Rangers own his right. So this is going to be another one where we don't even have to make an offer right now because he's probably going to linger out there on the free agent market for a little bit. So we could be a little more strategic if we do decide we really want him to fill a gap as we sign a few players. Can maybe make an offer painful enough that the Rangers won't sign him, but I tend to think that they will. Doesn't seem like the conversations with Jason Dickinson for coming back are going that well, which is fine. We'll move on from him. Trennan, though, did get a pretty big offer from Vegas. Luke Kunin did get a pretty big offer from the Capitals. So those guys aren't going to be the bargains that we maybe thought that they would be. Looks like a lot of players are mutually agreeing to cancel their contracts. So with that being said, I guess the question is, do we pivot back to Aho? Definitely being, I don't want to say schizophrenic, but definitely being volatile with how I'm approaching this free agency, without a doubt. But if those kind of more second and third line fill-in guys are going to be looking for huge money, then do we just give huge money to one of the best players on the market? And I think, this really is going to take us out of being able to really do anything at all in free agency unless we get rid of some contracts. But we are also adding one of the best players in hockey. $12 million, that would just destroys the budget if we do that. I like these guys, Kunin and Trennan, because they're both kind of two-way guys. A little better, I'd say, defensively than they are offensively, but again, for like third line guys, which they would most likely be, they're pretty solid players to have on a team. He's looking for almost $6 million a year now, though. I think if Kunin's looking for $6 million, getting Aho for less than $12 million is not a bad deal. I don't know that he's going to go for this, but at least if he doesn't, it probably guarantees that someone's going to be paying full price or more than full price for him. So we're going to submit the offer for $11.95 million a year to Aho and see what happens. Definitely not going smoothly in free agency. Last year, we focused on Larkin and Blackwood and Colton, and we just kind of got those guys, made good offers, got them signed relatively quickly. Not a lot of bargaining and complaining and posturing back and forth, and it's a different free agent market this season. And the word on the street is that Aho may be signing with Pittsburgh. which again wouldn't be great, but this claims that Anaheim is the top team for him. I guess the question is whether we pivot back to Trenin and Kunin, or wait a day, see what happens. It looks like none of those are active for us at this point. The active contracts are Sanderson, who we're waiting to hear from, and the young guys. So I think we've got to move on from Aho. The question is how aggressively we want to go after a guy like Luke Kunin. I think he'd be a helpful guy for our team. He is relatively young. $5.95 million just seems like a lot for him. Would he do $5.75 million over 3 years? He's willing to think about it. So at least we'll keep discussions going with him. And then I guess if we're involved in discussions with him, then probably revisiting things with Mr. Trenin makes sense also. Although he's looking at close to $3 million a year, and don't necessarily know that he's going to be a good fit with the team. I think we may move on from him. I think Dickinson's money is probably getting a little ridiculous too. Oh, $1.98 million. Come back to him with $1.95, and he's willing to think about it. So we'll see what happens. Seems like we're out of the running on Aho at this point. But if we could bring back Dickinson, also bring in Kunin, that's at least filling a couple of holes on the team that have been created. And then, again, I don't think there's any way we're getting Jake Sanderson, but if for some reason Ottawa doesn't match that offer, that would be a huge addition for us. And good news that Victor Arvidsson, who we signed to an extension after the season, is almost 100% after we delayed treatment on that injury so he could be part of our Stanley Cup run. Dickinson, looks like we've got a good offer to him. And Kunin, it looks like we've got a good offer to him right now. So we'll find out what happens with those offers, and we'll see where Aho ends up and for how much money. Our peak offer to him was $11.95 million over 6 years, so I'm guessing he's going to be well over that amount with whoever he ends up signing for. And the draft lottery is not interesting to us this year as we are not part of it. Looks like the Blue Jackets, the Sabres, and the Coyotes with the top 3 picks. We do have 2 first-round picks. Ours will obviously be at the end of the draft, and we also have Tampa Bay's pick. They had tied for the most points in the NHL last year, but they did get bounced in the first round of the playoffs. So that will, probably be in the early 20s, I would guess. And my math apparently was wrong. Obviously, our pick is the last in the round, and I don't really understand how the Lightning are 28th after getting bounced in the first round. I would have thought that at worst they could be, at worst they would be 24th, but obviously I don't understand all the ins and outs of how the how those picks are figured out. So probably not going to get any difference makers with those 2 picks towards the end of the draft. But, we may get some players who can help us down the line. Arvidsson healthy now. Adam Fox supposedly on the market. That would be very interesting. Anthony Duclair, who is a decent offensive player on the market. Yeah, close to $5 million a year. Honestly, he's kind of a similar player to be Arvidsson, to Arvidsson, to be quite honest. All kind of offense, not a lot of defense. I don't know how many of those guys we want on the team for that kind of money. So no need to approach him. So the big event now is the rookie draft. We've been doing our scouting for the last year. I think we hopefully know the prospects pretty well. Got 2 picks at the end of the first round. Probably not going to find an immediate difference maker, but hopefully we'll find some players who can contribute, 2, 3, 4 years down the line for the Blackhawks. And a lot of big-time prospects at the top of the draft. Obviously not expecting any of them will be around when it gets to our first pick at number 28. And, of course, they are not. But we'll spend some time looking at who is out there and see if we can come up with a interesting pick here at number 28. And I think the plan is to go a defenseman at 28 and then come back with a forward with our next pick. There's plenty of both around, and there's only going to be 3 picks between us, between our 28th and 32nd picks. Leaning towards Xavier Veilleux. Pretty clean defensive prospect. He was expected to go right around here at number 29 in the draft. Wants to be in college at Harvard for the next couple of years, which is fine since he's certainly not ready to be on an NHL roster. But clean player, high on IQ test, stays out of trouble. Looks like a pretty clean defensive prospect for us, who at least right now appears to be a little more of an offensive defenseman than a defensive expert, but could definitely use somebody who could be a quarterback for us down the line. So we're going to go with Veilleux. We hope that we see Danford and Kiviharju go in the next couple of picks, because that'll give us more of a selection of frontliners. Villeneuve, Boisvert, and who else did we like? Easier way to find it. Oh, Braden Dubé. Those are kind of 3 of the guys that we've got targeted for the next pick. So hopefully a couple of them will be around. So we're going to go ahead and pick Xavier Veilleux. So in our first 2 drafts with the Blackhawks, we've had 3 first-round picks so far, and we've used all 3 on left defensemen. We will change that with our next pick here. But Veilleux on board. Left defenseman Hudson Bjornsson goes next, followed by Dubé, who was a guy that we were interested in, followed by Seth Tansen, and now we're up. So now we've got a choice of frontline players for our next pick. But Dubé, unfortunately, we did miss out on. And it will, as I expected, come down to Villeneuve or Boisvert. And we're going to go with Sasha Boisvert. I think he may have a little more upside, at least according to our scouts. They think he can be a top player in the league eventually. Not very loyal, but he's sportsmanlike, stays out of trouble, so relatively clean prospect. He was projected to be 11th in the mock draft, so seems like it's good value, although from that perspective, in the interest of full disclosure, Nathan was predicted to be 7th in the draft, so we could claim that we would be getting even better value if we picked him. But we are going to go with Boisvert here at number 32. And move on to the second round, and I'm guessing none of these guys here will be around 32 picks later. Wow. Nathan Villeneuve is around at the end of the second round. I think we have to take him. He's got a lot of growth in kind of every area before he's going to be ready for the NHL. But he's also a guy who just turned 18 a couple of months ago. I guess close to 3 months ago at this point. Stays out of trouble. We think he can become a good player in the league. Again, he was projected to go 7th in the draft. Can play any position on the front line. We thought about taking him 32 picks ago, and he was, again, predicted to go 7th in the mock draft. Certainly don't think he'll be around for our 3rd round picks, so we'll happily take him now at the end of the 2nd round. Now getting into the point of the draft where, players who are less likely to be true difference makers for us, but we do have 3rd rounders from St. Louis and Ottawa. Both pretty late picks, obviously, with St. Louis having had a good year and Ottawa having lost to us in the Stanley Cup Finals, but they're still both better picks than the one that we would be having at number 96 that we traded away. So see if we can find some talent here. And we're going to go with Ashton Tate, right winger who has been playing with Kamloops for the last few years. Pretty versatile forward. Scouting report on him is decent, pretty smart, doesn't take success for granted. He is a little prone to controversy. He was expected to be pick number 96, so not necessarily great value, but not bad value either, getting him at pick number 90. So we're going to go ahead with Tate right now, and we're going to have another pick coming back very soon. At number 95, I am a little intrigued in the goalie here, Ryerson Leenders. Although we've got a 4th rounder from Nashville that we might be able to get Leenders at. Got to give that some thought. I feel like Leenders is the best goalie prospect that's out there right now. Gets along well, high IQ, although he's not particularly loyal to his teams. I think he's got the potential to be better than Mackenzie Blackwood. He was projected to be number 76. Feel like there will always be a decent forward or defenseman prospect for that upcoming 4th round pick, but there's no guarantee that the guy who looks like he may be the top goalie left is going to be available then. So we're going to go ahead with Leenders here with our 2nd, 3rd round pick. And now, not too many picks later, we've got another option. Actually, yeah, it wasn't that too long to get to this Nashville pick. So maybe Leenders still would have been there, but we've made our choice. Actually, he probably wouldn't have been because you can see that 2 other goalies, Rimpian and Carreras Pata, both went off in the last few picks. So probably was wise that we took Leenders when we did. And here in the 4th round, I think we're just going to go with someone who's got a little more upside, Linus Eriksson. Our scout likes, consensus really likes. He was projected to be the 46th pick. He's spent his whole career in Sweden and his whole life in Sweden at this point, but he's only 18 years old, so that's not really unique. I don't think there's any guarantee that he'll ever come over to the NHL and be ready to go, but if he completely develops, I think he's an interesting player. So for the 4th round, a guy who's got some upside seems like the way to go. So we're going to go ahead with Eriksson here in the 4th. Move on to our next pick, which is also from Nashville near the top of the 5th round. And you can see there is one other 3.5-star potential player. We looked at him a little earlier, Lou Levesque. Consensus is lower on him than we are. Scouting report is not bad. He's just got a ton of growth that needs to happen, and he's a little smaller at 5'11", 165. He's a little older at 19 years old, soon to be 20. I just don't know that he's a player that's going to reach his potential, so we may go looking in a different direction than Levesque here at the top of the 5th round. And here in the 5th round, we're going to go with right defenseman Roy Chung. Looks like a really clean prospect. He's going to be spending the next few years likely in college at St. Thomas. Was projected to be the 86th pick, but high IQ player, avoid dwelling on failures, stays out of trouble on the ice. Think he could be, potentially a decent defenseman down the line for us. Most likely he's not going to become an NHL player here in the 5th round, but not the worst prospect in the world to be picking at this point in the draft. So we're going to go with Roy Chung, and we still got 2 picks left, our 6th and Seattle's 7th. Levesque is still out there. I think in the 6th round you do take him. Again, I think it's unlikely that he's going to develop the way that we want him to. But you're just looking for potential at this point, and we think he's got more potential than anybody out there. So for a 6th round pick, I think it's totally fine. And 1 pick left. Who are we going to do with the pick from Seattle? And we'll go with a right winger in the 7th round. Looks like he is a dual Swiss and Canadian, Jordan Forget. Young player, just turned 18 about 3 months ago. Was projected to be the 132nd pick in the draft. Pretty good personality. Stays out of trouble, handles criticism well. Avoids dwelling on his failures with the kind of enhanced harmony system. We pay a little more attention to that in this version of the game than maybe we did before. Looking at his profile, looks like he could be a pretty interesting offensive player, has some decent physical skills. His mental and his defensive skills not quite as high. But this is a lottery ticket at this point in the 7th round. If everything works out, looks like he could be a somewhat useful player down the line. So we will go ahead with him, and the draft is over. And good news, the day after the draft, consensus among the media was that the Blackhawks had the best overall draft. So we will see, particularly with what happens with those guys we got at the top, Veilleux, Boisvert, and Villeneuve. Hopefully they'll be contributors, and then hopefully we get somebody in those later rounds who's ultimately a helpful player. But good to see a positive reaction to our draft. A lot going on with free agents too. Bo Horvat is ready. Jason Dickinson did sign, so he will be back with us. Aho with the Ducks. What is the number there? 6 years, $68.5 million. So that was less average than we had offered, because we had offered $11.95 million, and that number is, if we could, 11.43 is the kind of, I think, average cap hit. So I guess starting out lower with him, we had offended him or bothered him to the point that we couldn't bring him on board. Trennan is off the market too. We did, it looks like, get Kunin signed. So that is positive. We got Dickinson back at center, and we got another winger on board with Kunin. Sanderson, not surprisingly, Ottawa matched the offer sheet there. We brought in Comesso, Kaiser, and Bass with their entry-level contracts. Already starting to think about the 2025 draft. And players that are still on the market, Tyler Toffoli, who's a little bit older but still would be a useful winger to us, looking at Calgary. So looking at our roster now, we've got a little bit of money left to spend. Getting Kunin on board gives us, with Kane, Arvidsson, and Kunin, it gives us three pretty strong right wingers. Feel that with Larkin and Horvat is our first two centers, and then Anderson, Dolan, and now Dickinson back. We're fine at center. Left wing definitely remains an area where we could use a more dynamic player. Not sure what exactly is out there at this point, but that's kind of a focus for us. And then we'll have to figure out what to do on the defensive side. You can see we've got Kaiser on the team now, Bass and Comesso. Don't think any of those guys are going to be helping us this year, but at least they are in the fold with contracts, and we can kind of sign one more guy who's making decent money, because obviously these guys aren't going to be on the roster when all is said and done, and we've got 25 guys right now. Maybe just to clean up the money a little bit, can send some of them down, send Bass to the ECHL for the time being. I mean, I don't know that that's where he's going to end up, and Comesso do the same. And then you can see, obviously it's not perfect because I don't know that this would be the actual roster, but about 77 million, so we can probably, and with 23 players, so we could bring on a player for about $4 million and still be fine at this point. Question is whether there's anyone who can play left wing that we want to bring on. There are actually interesting players. I mentioned Toffoli. I think he's a little older, and I think he's going to be a little more expensive. We could probably fit him at $4.6 million. I like Elias Lindholm a lot. If we had decided to go big and we didn't get Aho, he was kind of a fallback, but I think he's looking for too much money. Yeah, over $7 million. So not going to be able to fit him in. Taves we already talked about. Anthony Duclair, definitely an offensive-focused left winger, and he's a little older than we'd like in a perfect world. But we do need another winger and one who can score. Again, $4.6 million. That's kind of like right at the upper end of what we can potentially afford. Not a horrible scouting report. My issue is, we signed Ross Colton as a left winger last year in his late 20s, signed Duclair as a left winger this year in his late 20s. These guys are not great players. They're better than replacement level. They're, solid, respectable third line guys in the NHL, maybe even second line guys, but you start putting out too many contracts of $4.5, $5 million to players that are just guys and not difference makers, and you can kind of get your budget into trouble relatively quickly. But I'm definitely thinking about it. Kevin LeBlanc, pretty versatile, not great at anything, not bad at anything either. I'm guessing he's going to be a similar amount. Little less, that could work. Like the fact that he can play both left and right wing. Again, he's not going to do anything brilliantly, but he's a pretty versatile player too. Good personality, good mental ratings, acceptable physically. respectable defensively and respectable offensively. For a third line winger where we need someone, particularly on the left side, I think I'd rather spend $2 million less on him than Duclair. I had looked earlier at Teuvo Teravainen. He would obviously potentially be a more dynamic offensive player. I think the issue with him was the amount of money he was looking for. Yeah, almost $6 million a year. We'd have to make other moves to fit him on the team. Yeah, that being said, this is a guy who scored 20 goals 3 straight years, and it may be longer than that, I'm guessing. No, I guess he obviously he had the can't really hold the 2021 season with COVID against him. Only 21 games, but 15 goals the season before. So looks like the Carolina Hurricanes are really turning over their roster with both Aho and Teravainen potentially leaving. He would definitely be the most dynamic offensive player. But that would necessitate us making some other roster moves. If we bring on Teravainen, I guess one thing we could think about trying to do is to try to bring on Teravainen and Kevin LeBlanc, and then you trade away Ross Colton to open up the money to kind of be able to afford both of those guys. Colton's another solid, respectable player. He's not as good as Teravainen, but I think he's probably better than LeBlanc. So I guess you're making the team a little better because you're getting 2 guys instead of 1. But what was LeBlanc's number anyways? Yeah, it was going to be about $2.5 million to get him on board. I feel good about the addition of Kunin. Very versatile player. What else do we do for our front line? Because if we go after Teravainen, we're going to have to get rid of somebody who's making reasonable money. And it definitely hamstrings us that it's going to be real hard to take on any contracts through the course of the season too. So I'd love to have Teravainen, but I just don't think we can afford him. Duclair, the offensive quality of him. This is a guy who was a 30-goal scorer 2 seasons ago. Is attractive to me, but I think I'm going to go with an offer for LeBlanc. He was a pretty productive offensive player each of the last 2 years with 25 and 24 goals. Kind of as a third line left winger for us, potentially. Second or third line wing. Certainly not going to be on the right side with the quality we have there, but as a potential guy who will probably transition towards trying to turn into a left winger. I think he could definitely help the team. And he's not looking for so much money that it's going to blow our budget. So we're going to try to offer him, deal it $2.4 million a year for 3 years. See what he thinks of that. Wants more money, of course. 2.55. Fighting with us for every penny. So we're going to fight back for every penny. 2.57 million. And he we'll consider that offer. So we'll find out what happens with LeBlanc, and then it's probably time to kind of regroup. We'll see what happens with LeBlanc over the next couple of days, and then we'll see where we stand. We'll probably have about $1.5 million, $2 million that we can potentially spend at that point. We do have a number of younger players that we made. It's not called a qualifying offer in hockey. I'm talking baseball lingo right now, but we auto-qualified them. So we could have the opportunity to match some offers that they might get. And then those, again, are kind of, third or fourth line wingers mostly. So definitely the type of guys that we might be willing to bring back, one or two of them. And then we can also kind of just dig in a little deeper and see if there are still any, players more like, I'm guessing Dylan Garand, who is likely a restricted free agent. Jacob Melanson, Jaden Grubby. Maybe even, why would he be available? Luis Philippe Fontaine. He was not picked in the draft. He's got to be, his rights have to be controlled by somebody. Huh? How has this guy never been drafted in the NHL at the age of 19? I might make an entry-level offer to him. Yeah, we'll make an entry-level contract offer to him. Give us a guy who might become a useful frontline player down the line. But as I said, after we find out what happens with the offers that we've made to our players, do any of the restricted free agents get offers? We'll see what happens with those over the next episode. We will continue to focus on who's available in free agency and if there's any good deals that we can offer. Gustav Forsling might not be a bad defenseman to think about. Actually, keep saying I'm going to finish this episode once we find out what happens with Mr. LeBlanc, but Gustav Forsling can play both left and right defense. He's 28 years old. I guess my question is, do we try to bring him on board for about that $4 million number that he's looking at now? And then do we move on from a McCabe or a Murphy, who are older, making just as much, if not more money? And both of those guys are better defensively, but Forsling is younger, making the same kind of money, and a little more versatile. Clearly a lot more productive offensively than those two guys. And I do like the fact that he's proficient at both left and right defense, which is always kind of useful to have a player like that for when you inevitably suffer from some injuries. If you've got a guy who's really good at both left and right defense, it gives you a little more flexibility, in my view, in terms of being able to keep your best players out there. Seems like a pretty decent personality. I think we're going to put an offer out there for Forsling also. with the plan being that we would trade away one of the older defensemen who admittedly are better stay-at-home defensemen, but are probably closer to beginning the downslide of their careers than Forsling is at this point. So we'll offer him $3.75 million for 3 years. I think 3.85 seems like that will probably get it done. So we'll submit that offer to him also. So we got a couple offers out there now. So we will find out in the coming days, hopefully, what's going to happen with those offers to LeBlanc and Forsling. And then once we figure that out, then we'll finish up the episode and come back in the next exciting episode of our playthrough of the Chicago Blackhawks with who we kind of need to potentially trade off if we get Forsling signed, what we can get for them, and then how we kind of clean up the back end of our roster. Ooh, and that was unexpected. LeBlanc signed with Washington. Didn't even give us a chance to kind of talk with him. Where is he on? I don't even see him on the roster yet. So that's a little surprising that a day later we are just done with him. $2.7 million. So that is more than we offered. But I guess they've got him on the Hershey Bears. So yeah, they're paying him a little more, but you're playing in the AHL, dude. And we did get Forsling signed, so that is good. Maybe we'll get Fontaine on that entry-level contract. So do have some decisions to make now with Forsling on board. I think that definitely gets our defense younger, since that will be the ultimate driver in terms of moving on from Connor Murphy or Jake McCabe. And we'll also save a little bit of money compared to either of those two players. Unfortunately, we still do have a gap on the front line, most clearly at left wing. So that's what we're going to have to figure out, how to shore up. Again, we're going to get another $4 million or so off of our cap when we get rid of McCabe or Murphy. So we will have money to bring on somebody. I think at this point the question is starting to be, do we try to go crazy and bring on a Teravainen? Do we go with Duclair? Do we look at the trade block, try to piece a trade together? Looks like there's some, respectable left wings out there. Older players, but guys who could certainly be useful. I don't know that we want to be paying, Sean Monahan $6.6 million a year for the next 5 years, but these other guys are probably prospects. So there are a lot of options for us to think about in our next episode. So we're going to figure out how to trade away a defenseman and figure out which defenseman we want to trade away, figure out how to hopefully bring on one more winger on the left side, and then I think those are probably going to be the big moves for the Blackhawks this offseason. So feel that we've gotten better. We didn't make a huge splash by any stretch of the imagination, but bringing on Kunin definitely helps. Bringing back Dickinson definitely helps. And then on the defensive side, bringing on Forsling helps. Left wing is what we've got to work on and get better at. So that's going to be the focus in our next episode when we go over the remainder of the offseason. Until then, thank you so much for watching and hope you have a great day.